Kennedy, and I am a career coach. Today, we are talking about performing in interviews. So, this is the second part to a webinar that I started last week, which was changing jobs and building confidence in 2024. And in the first webinar, we touched on topics like, identifying your skills, strengths, and achievements, preparing applications, finding suitable jobs, all those types of super important topics. So, for anyone who attended that and coming back to this one, thanks for coming back. If you're just attending this one, well, thanks for joining. I hope you get tons out of it. So the nature of preparing for interviews and performing well in interviews means that we have to touch on lots of topics that are important all throughout the career change journey, not the career train. So we have to touch on all these important topics. So it's going to deal with some obstacles that come up, some challenges that you might have. So while it's about interviews, it's also about all the other stuff as well. So if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them in the comments and I'll get onto them as soon as I can. So that way I can tailor the session specifically to your exact needs. If you're interested in these types of workshops on an ongoing basis, please subscribe to the community and that you will get more updates about more of these workshops. For example, next week I'm doing a workshop on goal setting, so get involved in that. It's January, but it's not too late to set your goals for the rest of the year. So performing interviews by learning what to say and how to say it. So I think the first thing to really realize when you think about this is to remember that if you've gotten to the interview stage, that you're already good enough, that you're good enough to pass the qualifications, you're good enough to pass the requirements of the job. That's why they've asked you to interview, because think of it from their perspective, they don't want to waste their time, they don't want to waste your time, and they wouldn't have asked you to the interview stage if they didn't already feel that you might have the potential to fulfill their needs, that you might be a good fit for the role. So please remember that already. You've already passed the basic requirements by getting to the interview. So what will we talk about in this session? Well, we'll talk about how to effectively prepare for your interviews. We'll talk about answering standard interview questions and one or two particular questions themselves. We'll talk about the STAR interview method. Many of you might know what that is, but for those who don't, we'll touch on that if we get a chance. But again, I will reorder these if if people ask for specific things, I will shift the order a little bit. I'll talk about 5 tips for emphasizing your value. Some frequently asked questions, and then questions you can ask the interviewer. So some people find that tricky. They know that it's good to ask a question at the end of an interview, or even 2 questions, but they might feel that everything's very well explained, but they still want to come across as enthusiastic. So in that case, what do you say? Okay, so we'll talk about those. So firstly, to kick off, what is the most important thing? Well, if there's one thing that you do in an interview more than anything else, and if there's only one thing you take away from this webinar today, it's this. There's one thing that we all want, and it's your job to convey that in an interview more than anything else, and that's going to help you get the job, and that is certainty. You want to convey to them certainty that you're the right person to do the job, that you're enthusiastic about the company, that you're interested in the job, that your career history is solid, is stable. There's good reasons for all the changes that you've done. Basically, you want to remove any doubt that they might have. You want to remove any concerns that they might have, and you want to give them as much certainty as possible. And if they feel that you're more of a certain candidate than the other person, well, then they're more likely to give you the job. I mean, think about, how do you make decisions based on anything? How do you just decide on where to live, or where to go to the gym, or what job to go to, or any of these types of things? Usually we make these types of decisions based on having more certainty that we're going to have a good outcome at the end of that, at the end of decision A, let's say, compared to decision B. Okay. Now, the other thing that's really important when you're setting out in an interview is your preparation, right? Obviously, you have to prepare yourself. Otherwise, you're not good. I mean, most people cannot just freestyle as they go. So here's how you prepare. Firstly, you set your intention. Now, what does setting your intention mean? Well, setting your intention means that you're going to outline exactly what you want to say, how you want to say it. If you only had 2 or 3 minutes to say everything you needed to say in that whole interview, your elevator pitch, how you meet the requirements for the role, dealing with any issues that they might have, any concerns they might have, you only had 2 or 3 minutes, what would you say? That's setting your intention. That way you have the ability to control the interview. This is what I do whenever I do interviews for podcasts or for TV shows or anything like that. I always have my intention for the interview. When I have my intention, I know I can control it to some extent, because I know that there's a couple of points I definitely want to say, and I'm just going to shape them and reshape them to answer the questions that I'm being asked. Then preparing your opening statement. So probably most people will just to kick the interview off and to organize their notes and get a sense of who you are, they'll say something like, can you tell us about yourself? And so if you are prepared for that, that's going to put you off on a good first step. So telling them about your skills, your achievements, why you're interested in the role, why you applied for the job, why you like the company, and then leading into, what particularly interested you about the role, and why you're excited about it. Then that will allow them to take the questioning from there and smoothly go into the next question. So that's all about setting your intention, having a good opening statement. Now, please remember, this is not an examination. This is not a test. At least it shouldn't be. Maybe they do psychometric tests, or they ask you for other kind of cognitive ability tests. But an interview itself is about getting to know you. It's not a test of your abilities. So you should enjoy the conversation. Basically, they want to get an understanding of who you are. They want to build a relationship with you, see if they can trust you, see if you're going to be a good fit for their organization and the environment that you're going to go into. And if you enjoy the conversation, they'll feel like you're enjoying the conversation, and there's a better chance of them enjoying the conversation. And I think, well, I'm not sure about you, but I've definitely been in conversations where I felt the other person hasn't been enjoying the conversation. And then, it's harder for you to enjoy that as well. So if you enjoy it, then probably they're going to enjoy it more. Also, it means at least if you're giving over your 1 hour or 2 hours of time to do these interviews and you don't get the job, at least you've had a good time. You've enjoyed the conversation. That point that you're already good enough because you've been invited to the interview, because an interviewer has already reviewed your CV, a professional has already looked through your requirements and your previous work history and decided that you're good enough to be sitting in that chair and doing that interview. That should give you comfort that you're already good enough to do that role. The next part is getting, in terms of preparation for the interview, is getting yourself in the right mindset. Okay. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's a wonderful TED Talk called Your Body Language Shapes Who You Are. It's by a lady named Amy Cuddy, and she talks about how your body language will help get you into a good mental state. So it'll help get you into a more confident, more powerful, more dominant mental state. And so what they found was, if you look at the images at the top there, when people are in these open, these strong, these powerful types of physiological positions, that they were more confident than when they went into meetings or they're in conversations after that. Whereas when they were in the more, let's call them negative or lower power body positions, like the ones you see on the bottom row, they were more, they were less confident, right? They were less powerful. They came across less well. So just doing something like that for 2 minutes or 3 minutes before you do any sort of interview will put you into a better physiological state. It will reduce your cortisol. It will make you feel more confident, more powerful, basically, right? So there's a top tip for you. Get yourself into a good physiological place. I also think it's really important that you have a good focus. So sometimes people, before they go into an interview, they're focusing on what they don't have. They're focusing on their weaknesses. They're focusing on some problem that they had with a previous employer. Well, if you focus on those, you're not going to feel very confident. So you have to focus on what you're good at. You have to focus on what you enjoy. You have to focus on, exactly what you want to say, the way you want to come across. So achievements, big responsibilities, why you like the job, why you're going to be the perfect fit, an X factor that you have that someone else doesn't have. You have to focus on all the things that you want to convey, all the things that make you feel confident. So what makes you feel confident? The other thing, so if you think getting yourself into the right mindset by using your body well, focusing on the things that make you feel confident, but also your internal dialogue. Often this is called self-talk, or it's called tons of other things as well. So your self-talk, your internal dialogue, whatever it might be, if you speak well to yourself, if you use good words, if you use good language, basically if you speak nicely to yourself, if you're kind to yourself, you're going to have yourself in a better a better mindset going in. That's why lots of experts, high performers, they all have these mantras that they use to get themselves into a good mindset before they go out. They don't have a negative internal dialogue. They have a positive, reaffirming, confidence boosting internal dialogue. So that's really important to have. And I always say to clients, if we do a session and we figure out all the strengths you have, all the achievements you have, all the responsibilities, all the reasons why you're going to be great for a job, and we talk very positively about you for an hour or 2 hours, whatever it might be, and then you spend the other 23 hours of the day, or the other 24 hours a day for the rest of the week, speaking negatively about yourself, or being unkind to yourself, then that's going to rule out a lot of what we did. It's going to rule out probably the majority of it, because it's going to be there for longer. So you got to be positive about yourself. You got to get yourself into a good physiological place, and you got to focus on what you want to convey. So I hope that's helping. I hope that's coming across well, and you understand my points on that. I'm just going to take a quick look to see if there's any questions popping up. The slides are showing backwards. Oh no, that's terrible. Hold on. Thanks for that. Thanks for that feedback. Let me see if I can flip them for you. Why are the slides showing backwards? Okay, sorry about that. Just give me a sec and see how I can mirror them. Oh, I think I've got it here. Now, okay, is that better, folks? Sorry about that, but that should be, no, that hasn't worked either, has it? Why are the slides backwards? That's just switching them from one side to the other, isn't it? Now, is that better? So I hope that is working better for you. Sorry about that. So I'm going to continue, but please let me know if that's working okay for you now. So the next point is the interview preparation. So talking about the specific position, why are you interested in that specific position? If you can name one or two of the responsibilities, that would be fantastic. So let's say they want you to lead a new marketing campaign, or they want you to develop an app for a finance software. Maybe they want you to design a new building for housing animals. I'm not sure, but figure out whatever the responsibilities are, and if you can relate to those, and that's really going to stand out. It's going to be more poignant for them, because you're specifically talking about something they spend 35-40 hours a week doing every week of the year, and you're kind of saying, look, I'm interested in this, I've researched it, it's going to resonate with them. So that's the first one. Talk about the specific position. Talk about the organization's needs, what's important to them. Maybe you could do research on their mission, on their vision, on their company. See if you align yourself to the values that they have, or what they're trying to achieve, or maybe illustrate how you've done similar work with other organizations before, and that's where you can bring the value from. You also want to be grateful and gracious. So what do I mean by that? When I talk about being grateful and gracious, it's really about when you're talking about a previous employer, maybe if they say, why are you leaving your job, or why did you leave your previous job? Maybe the job went well, maybe it didn't go well, maybe the relationship with the boss was good, maybe it wasn't good. Either way, you want to be grateful, and you want to be gracious. So you want to say what went well. So you could say, look, I met many wonderful people. I had a great time working with the team. I learned how to deliver projects on time. I learned how to solve technical problems in developing code, or I learned how to run a marketing campaign from start to finish. Whatever it is that you learned, that you're grateful for the people that you met. And then gracious, if something didn't work out, or if you weren't the right fit, to be able to say that in a gracious way, saying, probably at the end of the day, I wasn't the perfect fit, or we weren't the perfect match, and that's okay. We agreed to disagree, or I wasn't able to do my best work there, so I told them that, and we decided that it was the right move to move on. And what you do in that, although it doesn't sound like it's perfect, and it doesn't sound like you're perfect, what it does is it builds trust with them, because you're saying positive things, but you're not saying everything's perfect, because who believes that everything's perfect anyway? Whereas if you're grateful and you're gracious, it comes across well, it builds trust, it removes doubt, and now we know that we can ask you another question, and we can trust that you're going to give us the real answer. So the other one is dealing with any questions of concern. So if there's any questions of concern that come up, let's say there's a gap in your CV that you want to talk about, or there's you know, a couple of years when you haven't worked. Maybe you're looking after a sick relative, or maybe you're sick yourself. Maybe you're sick yourself, or maybe you lost your job during COVID, or there was a redundancy. You want to be able to deal with all those answers up front, and make sure that it's coming across well. So how do you deal with those answers up front? That's what's really important. So I think, when people say, well, what do I say for being sick or being out of work for? Well, firstly, be honest. So what is the truth? Figure out what the truth is. If you were sick, or if a member of the family was sick, you can just say, we were sick and that was the top priority. Family comes first, health comes first, and that's what we needed to do. If there was other issues, like, let's say, you lost your job during COVID, some people will feel like that knocks their confidence because they lost their job, and they might feel, well, that means that I'm not good at my job. But really, if there was a pandemic or a recession, lots of people lose jobs just because there's a downturn, there's less jobs available. Being able to say, yeah, it was an unfortunate circumstance. I lost my role, and I spent time looking for a new job. And that's just the situation I found myself in. When you acknowledge the reality of the situation, then it's easier to move on. But you got to deal with those things. You got to be honest with them. You can be honest, and then you can give the nice framing of the situation as well. So I hope that makes sense. So let me just refresh. I hope the slides are working better for you now. Now it's mirroring again. Oh no. Sorry, folks. Let me try again. Okay. Okay, wait. Let me see if that has worked now. Okay, you had it. Thanks, Michelle, for telling me, and Niels. Okay, so I hope that's working for you guys now. I'm gonna keep going. Okay. So questions they ask to ask the interviewer. Well, what do you really want to ask? Maybe you want to ask them, how do you stop mirroring text on a webinar? That would be one good question to ask. That's what I want to know. But typically questions you want to ask, I think you want to ask questions that maybe you don't know from the job spec, genuine questions you had when you read about the interview. But other good questions to ask would be things like, what is the biggest challenge for the organization over the next 6 months? Because when you ask that question, now you're getting into the zone of where they are. You're trying to figure out what's on the agenda, what their strategy is. You're trying to figure out what you're going to be going into, and how you would deal with that. So what's the biggest challenge for the organization or the department over the next 6 months? You might, depending on how deep you want to go, you might also ask them, like, how is it going? Or what's the biggest challenge in achieving that goal, in your opinion? So that's kind of a very much, going into the practicalities, the business of it. If you feel you're clear on those types of things already, you might want to ask them something like, what do you enjoy most about the role? What do you enjoy most about working here? By asking a question like that, you allow them to tap into what's really enjoyable for them, have good feelings about the question you're asking them, and talk about something fun, talk about something enjoyable. And I think the other nice thing about that is, you're creating a positive environment in the interview. If they say, the money, that will tell you something about their values. If they say the people, it will tell you something else about their values. And so on and so forth. If they say freedom, it will tell you something else about their values. So based on what they say, you have an understanding of their values, and then you can see if that aligns with your values. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So some common obstacles that people come up against when they're doing interviews. I'm going to go through them one by one. But again, please tell me if you have any particular obstacles that you struggle with. One of the main ones is you don't like selling yourself. So often people say, I'm happy to sell a company or sell a product or sell someone else, but I definitely don't like selling myself. And one of the reasons is it feels a little bit awkward. We might feel inauthentic. It just feels strange, right? We don't like it. Comes across, we might feel it comes across as boasting, or comes across as being too confident. All of those types of things. So I've come up with a couple of phrases to help you sound more humble when you describe yourself, to help you sound more humble when you're selling yourself. So here they are. Take a look at those. I'm going to refresh the screen and see if I've figured out how to mirror properly. Let's see. Oh, I got it yet. Okay. So my current role involves taking responsibility for X, Y, Z. So you can say driving a team of developers, for liaising with international vendors, or for mitigating financial risks on a monthly basis, whatever it might be. Thankfully, I've had the opportunity to work with a great team, which allowed me to. And then you can put a success in there. You can put in something that you're proud of or that you've achieved in there. The next one is I've been fortunate enough to work with great clients or great stakeholders, which resulted in an increase of or an improvement of XYZ, and you can fill that in there. That's really a nice one to use. In that case, we're still selling ourselves. We're still saying what we've done well, but we're attributing the credit to someone else. The next one is I've worked extremely hard over the past few years to develop my skills in. So there we're saying like really it was down to hard work. I mean, I have the skills there, but we're saying it was down to the hard work and all the dedication and the commitment. So I've worked really hard over the last few years to develop my skills in managing a community, learning social media tools, or whether it be learning property law, or whatever else it might be. The challenge I've had in the previous role facilitated and empowered my personal or professional development. If there's anything particularly difficult and you have to talk about it somehow, you can talk about how that challenge has built you, how that challenge has allowed you to develop, how that challenge has allowed you to grow further. So like my challenge of working with high value clients, or my challenge of dealing with a company transformation through COVID, has allowed me to grow personally, professionally, develop skills in XYZ, learn knowledge of ABC. Luckily, after trial and error, so again, we're saying you've achieved the result, but you had to do some difficult things to get there. Luckily, after trial and error, I was able to build a company. I was able to manage a community. I was able to secure a new property for a client. I was able to launch a product on the market, whatever it might be, and so on. The last one, the benefit of gaining qualifications, is so you're still getting a chance to say all these things, but you're being humble about it. Okay, so just as we stay on that slide, I'm going to check the comments to see if there's any other questions here. Do I have it? It's all good now. Okay, great. Thanks, Niels. So we talked about the gap on the CV. It's really important to be honest and to deal with it. That's another question that you might come up with in an interview. If you're talking to the interviewer and the interviewer says, if there's a moment when you feel something didn't go right, I don't really get a sense that this interview is smooth. I feel like there's something they're concerned about that they're not telling me. When they say, do you have any questions for us? You can always ask them then. They might not tell you, but you can still say, look, is there anything that I've mentioned during the interview that you're not sure of? Is there anything that you're unclear of? Is there anything you'd like me to explain further just before we finish up? And then we make sure that we've covered all the various topics. And you just give them one more chance to say exactly what could be on their mind. In sales, that would be handling objections. So maybe they have an objection in the back of their mind, and you say, look, I want to give you, one more chance to see if there's anything else that we can deal with just while we're on this call, and then we can iron it out there and then. And that way you get a chance to deal with that, and they don't guess something incorrectly about you. Okay. Sometimes people are concerned about needing more education. But again, the issue with needing more education and feeling like, let's say you're not an expert, is if they've already asked you to the interview at that stage, you should be good enough to do the job. If they need you to do additional courses or additional learning, then you can just tell them about your commitment, your drive, your openness to actually taking on more courses or learning on the job, or a combination of both. Okay. But really, if someone, because sometimes interviewers will will keep asking questions till they find a limit or till they find a barrier. And so they might say, but are you an expert in that? Do you have skills in this? Do you have skills in this? And they just want you to hear you say no at some point, so they know that you're not saying you can do everything of everything. They want to know that you're not perfect. And the issue is, if you've been selling yourself to someone for an hour, when we sell ourselves to someone for an hour, it sounds like we're perfect. And so sometimes they want to just hear where the limitation is or where the stop is. And when you say, actually, no, that other thing, I don't do that. And if that's what you want, I didn't see that on the job description. If that's what you want, I'm probably not the best person. But if you want all these other things, then I can absolutely do those. Okay. I mean, sometimes that happens when clients come to me. They say, I know you're a career coach and not a recruiter, but can you get me a job? And I'll say, do you want me to, take your resume and give it to an employee and directly fit you into a role? Or do you want me to help you understand your skills, your value, help you prepare applications, do interview preparation, and prepare you as best as possible, and then you apply for a role? I can do the second one, but I cannot do the first one, right? I cannot actually stick you into a literal job. And that in that case, we create the limit or the boundary. Sometimes people feel they don't have enough experience, or they feel they're overqualified. If you feel you don't have enough experience, you don't need to worry. You just need to talk to the employer about that and ask them, what they think, because they've obviously already brought you to that interview at that stage. The bigger concern is typically people who feel they're overqualified. Now, if you feel you're overqualified, but you're still interested in the job, that's actually pretty common. People would say, I know my skills and my experience are here, but for various different reasons, I want to go for this job. And those reasons could be like life choices. They might say, look, I'm just at a different stage. I don't want stress in my career. I don't want these big challenges. I don't want to, have to work 50, 60 hours a week. I just want a slightly easier job, or I'm more focused on, having family or whatever it might be. That's fine. You just need to explain that. Say, I'm really happy to do this job, and I'm very excited about it. And this suits me for a combination of personal and professional reasons. And that's really why I want it. So I'm happy to do this. And you just have to make sure that they know you're happy to do it, because the concern they have is that if you go into the job and you're bored after 3 months or 6 months, that you're going to say, well, I'm actually overqualified for this job and I want to move up, or I want to do a more difficult job. Well, now they feel like they have to promote you, or you're dissatisfied. So you just have to put their fears or their concerns at ease and say, no, I'm perfectly qualified, and I'm happy to do the job. And once you get that across, then you're going to be okay. Okay. Now, some standard interview questions. What do they look like? Well, they look like this. Can you tell us about yourself? That's a classic first one. Why do you want the job? Why do you want to leave your present company? What are your strengths and weaknesses? What do you understand about this job? So can you explain the current job to them? Do you know what they're looking for? What do you understand about the organization? What challenges do you foresee? Can you tell us the time when you experienced conflict, right? And do you have any concerns for us? There's some standard, interview questions, and really you're best to write out answers to this. Most people, when you put them on the spot, they're not quite ready to answer all these questions. They might know that they're able to answer it, but just having the verbal memory, being able to articulate it in a moment, being able to say the exact phrases that you want, to be able to be concise, get your point across, they can be kind of difficult. So it's really best to write it out in bullet points, or just write out keywords about exactly what you want to say. I'm going to go into the weaknesses question and the conflict question a little bit later on. So we'll go into that in a bit more detail. There's other types of questions that you might get asked in an interview as well. These will often be called competency-based questions. So this is where they're asking you to give them an example. So can you give me an example of when you disagreed with a supervisor? Can you tell me a time when you had conflict at work and how did you deal with it? Can you tell me about a situation where you had to solve a difficult problem or work under pressure, deliver a result, manage a team, lead a team, carry out a transformation project? All these are like competency-based questions. They require you to give them a detailed example. And the best thing to do in that situation is use the STAR methodology. STAR methodology, maybe you know it already, maybe you know it under different guise. but it's basically S for situation, T for task, A for action, and R for result. Situation, task, action, and result. And if you use those 4 steps, you're going to be able to give a much more complete answer. Some of the issues people have when they're talking about competency questions is basically they don't complete those 4 steps. They miss out one of them. They miss out the situation, or they miss out the result. You should fill them all in. So the situation is straightforward. You're just describing exactly what happened. The task is what you have to do, your specific goal in this case. The action is the chunky part of the example. It's the meaty part of the example. It's where you have to go into lots of detail, because that's where we hear the value that you bring. That's where we hear all the details that you went through to solve this problem. In that case, it's really important that you talk about a little bit of friction that you had or some challenge that you had, because if you can explain to us how it was difficult, but you overcame it, you're going to sell yourself better to us than if you just describe a bunch of actions that you've carried through, but it didn't seem like there was any challenge, any friction, any difficulty. So it's really important that you put that in there as well. So I always like to hear a little bit of friction, like what was the challenge? What was the most difficult part? What did you struggle with, right? And that really tells us a lot about you and how you work. And the final part is the result, or for result. So what was the result that you got? Because that tells us that you were successful. And it's not just saying, oh, we completed the project, but tell us the metrics, tell us the sales you made, tell us how many users or how many followers you got. And not just give us the quantitative results, but also the qualitative. So give us the fact and give us the feeling. So if you did it correctly, and also how did you feel about it? How did your manager feel? How did your client feel? How did the customers feel? The vendors, were they happy? So basically, were people happy? And did you achieve your results? And if you can give us that at the end, that is a complete answer. Okay. So that's how you go through the competency-based questions: situation, task, action, and result. To be honest, I could do a full webinar just on competency-based questions alone, but you can go into tons and tons of detail on those. But that's the general overview. And again, best to write those out in advance, because it's super difficult to do it on the spot. Okay, now going to take a quick check back at LinkedIn and see how we're doing over here. Okay, I've got my slides back on track, so that's a big success. Right, get the basics right. Thanks for your patience with that, folks. Really, really appreciate it. Now, some weaknesses. Okay, this is the weakness example is one thing that people struggle with. So yeah, there's a kind of funny comic that I found there. What's your greatest strength, or what's your greatest weakness? But what's your greatest strength? You can't say no to people. Can you elaborate? No. I love that. So pushing on to the weakness, a couple of things are really important when we think about weaknesses. So one of the ones is it should be authentic, because think about it. You're interviewing with smart people, and smart people are going to know if your weakness is authentic or inauthentic. So it's got to be authentic. It's got to be real. You have to be showing how you can improve on it, or how you're in the process of improving on it, because we want to hire someone who's proactive, who's growth orientated. So it's got to be authentic. You've got to be working on it and showing how you're working on it. And then the third thing I'd say about the weaknesses is it cannot be essential to the role, right? So if you need to have an understanding of property law, or if you need to be able to code Python, you can't say that's the weakness. That's essential to the role. But please don't turn your weakness into a strength. People are, recruiters and hirers, they're smart. They're going to understand that you're just trying to turn a weakness into a strength, and it's just going to come across as a stock answer, and it's not going to come across as authentic, in my opinion. I think you're much better off building trust by telling them a genuine weakness that you're working on. People say, yeah, I got you. I'm with you. But what's that mean? Give me some examples. Here we go. Here's some examples. Impatience, poor delegation. Public speaking can be difficult. Perfectionist. Now, these are genuine weaknesses, obviously. And this feels very counterintuitive, because normally I help people sell themselves, not unsell themselves. So this is kind of an ironic thing for a career coach to be doing. Nevertheless, it's all part of the show. So there's some examples I've written in the text as well. If you're impatient, it can lead to doing things too quickly and making mistakes. If you're very growth orientated, sometimes you can be impatient. That's one of the downsides, right? People are trying to grow so fast that they're actually impatient. end up making mistakes or doing things poorly or poorly planned out. Some people struggle to delegate. So they find it hard to give work over to other people, or they find it hard to monitor other people. They find it hard to check in, or they just don't know that. They think, oh, it's better if I just do it myself, because if I do it myself, I'm going to do it exactly the way I want. And then they take in all these other pieces of work from all the other people, and then they get totally overwhelmed. Public speaking. Well, public speaking apparently is the number one fear that all humans have. I think death is second. Isn't that what we say? Public speaking is the biggest fear and death is the second biggest fear. But loads of people are afraid of public speaking. I guess just being in front of a crowd, we feel vulnerable, we feel nervous. I have to say, I think it's a little bit easier in webinars, right? It's just you and a little camera. And perfectionist is the classic one, right? If someone takes too long or so long to do something because they're trying to get it absolutely right, they'll say something like, oh, I think I fear failure, so I'm an absolute perfectionist. And one of my struggles then is to know when to get it done where it's good enough and then produce it or send it out or ship it. Then that can be a weakness worth working on. But again, it's not like, oh, I'm perfectionist and that's why everything I do is perfect. It's like, no, I'm perfectionist and this is a challenge. This is something I'm working on. Okay. I'll give you a few more weaknesses, like if you're indecisive or you struggle with numeracy or computer skills, or maybe you feel you don't have the industry knowledge. Once you tell them, you build trust, you have them understand what they need to work on, and you come across as more authentic. Okay. So I hope that helps and makes sense to you guys. How do you handle conflict? Okay, let me do a quick check of the comments again. How do you handle conflict? So a classic question comes up, especially at higher level roles. We need to know that you can work with other stakeholders, and we need to know that you can deal with challenges in the team, whether the team are fighting or one of your employees is struggling to work with you for whatever reason. How do you handle conflict? Or even a client, maybe a client is in a conflict with you. So again, you might be able to successfully handle conflict again and again and again, but how do you talk them through the steps of how you do it? Okay, well, here's a few points I have for you. So you listen to understand the other person's point of view. And I think that's the most important step, right? Usually there's a conflict when people don't feel understood. They don't feel heard. Maybe you have a different perspective on that. Please share it in the comments. But listen to the other person's point of view, understand them clearly. Maybe you can explain your point of view to them, but also explain your positive intention that you want to help, you want to improve, you want to solve, you want to understand. Okay. And then that intention is your guiding force throughout those conversations. So if your intention is to solve the issue and to partner with them and understand them and come up with a solution together, then that's the sort of message you want to convey in the interview as well. To understand that both parties are on the same page, it's really important to relate your points to each other. So if you explain your points and they explain their points, that you can both relate the other person's point back to each other. That's how you make sure that you've got like good rapport, that you're on the same level. Okay, it's one of the reasons I ask you guys loads of questions in the webinar, so that I can understand where you're at. I can understand what you're struggling with. I can understand if the slides are backwards. Okay. Then aim to reach an agreement. Or some sort of workable solution or a viable solution. Maybe sometimes it's even agreeing to disagree, right? But to be able to say, I listen, I explain my point of view, I let them explain their point of view, I ask them if they understand me, and make sure they understand my point, I understand their points. Then we try to find a workable solution together. Then we check in later to see if everything's going okay, and if there's any issues that we follow up, we make sure that we've solved that together. So that would be one way of solving or outlining how you handle conflict. They might also ask it to you as a competency-based question and say, can you give us an example of how you've solved conflict? In that case, going through the situation, the task, the action, and the result. Okay. Now, we're doing well, folks. So we're just coming to the end, the last couple of minutes. But just before we go, you want to be able to emphasize value in an interview, throughout the interview, but definitely in the competency-based questions. That's where you get to explain examples in a long form manner, and where you get to really sell yourself. It's super important, especially when you go for higher level jobs. They're going to focus more on competency-based questions. They're going to focus more on examples. So you want to make sure you get a couple of key points across. You might not get them all across, but you can touch on as many of these as possible. So when you're trying to emphasize your value, you can talk about the key learning that you got from delivering a project, from delivering results, from launching a product, from entering a new market, from leading a team, from carrying out a digital transformation. What was your key learning? Because it shows us that you're growth orientated, that you're able to learn, that you're able to apply those learnings to a new role, to a new company. You can talk about the top metric, so they know you're goal orientated, that you're commercially focused, that you're focused on the numbers, that you're watching the key targets all the time. When you show that you're talking about those key metrics, it shows you know what what's important, you know what you're focused on, you know what you're trying to achieve. Because a classic issue people have when they have a manager who's just telling them everything is a priority, what the manager is saying is everything is important. Well, really, that means the manager doesn't know what's important, because everything cannot be a priority. A priority means one thing is more important than the other thing. And so when you're saying what metric is a priority, you're saying, I know this metric is more important than the other metric. So what's more important, client satisfaction or increasing the amount of clients, right? Knowing the difference between those for the company you're going for is going to be really important. The next one is the main relationship. So what was the main relationship in your example? What was the main relationship in the story? And how did you get the best out of that relationship? How did you build it? Or how did you mend it? Or how did you reset it to get the best result and to create a good partnership going forward? So to emphasize the main relationship. Talk about the success factor. What led to success in this case? Out of all the things that happened, the ups and downs, what was the main thing that led to success? Maybe it was you having a really good project plan. Maybe it was you identifying the risks and coming up with plans in advance. Or maybe there was something else that led to success. Resilience, for example. Or during COVID, maybe it was just showing flexibility and allowing people more personal time to achieve a goal. What was the key success factor? And then finally, biggest impact. Out of all the things you do, not everything has the same impact. So knowing which action had the biggest impact in delivering the result is going to show that you know not just the results that are important, but also the action steps that lead to those results. So what action step had the biggest impact? And if you can emphasize that as part of your competency-based example, as part of your story for demonstrating your value, for taking them through an example, I think that's going to come across as really, really well. Now, you're not necessarily going to get all of those key tips into one competency-based question or into any interview. But I guess when you ask yourself those questions, it just gives you another way of thinking about how you can convey the value that you can bring to an organization. Gives you another question to figure out, how you can sell yourself. So I hope that helps. I hope they're clear. I'm going to give you a chance to ask any other questions you might have and refresh this LinkedIn chat now. If you like this workshop, thanks so much for attending. But if you want to find out more workshops like this, please join the career development community. It's in the link in the chat. And I'll do another workshop next week on goal setting. Every Monday, 5:30, I'm going to do a live workshop on LinkedIn. You can join there and be part of it. So I hope that helps and gives you a bit of a cadence of accountability and a good idea of how you can keep your career development going. But that looks like we have covered everything. So thanks so much for joining the session today. Thanks for your patience with me as I orientate the slides the right way. A little bit funny, a little bit embarrassing, but there we go. We live and we learn. I hope you have a great evening. And maybe we'll see you next week for the goal setting session. Thanks so much and take care.